Welcome to Stand Firm 360. This is our first monthly teaching. It's weird. I've been doing this on Thursday nights, but we wanted to bring it into the hour, into what we do on Fridays. And that way, so we're all can be there together and walk through this. And so I'm diving into Daniel 9. Daniel 9 is incredible. There's several things going on in that chapter. The thing that we typically jump to is the vision of the 70 weeks or 77s or 70 years. And I want to tell you, as I going through Bible college, through seminary, this vision of all the visions of Daniel and really in prophet, well, let's say Zacharias gets some wild stuff, but within Daniel, this was a prophecy I'm just like, I'm staying away from. This is too wild. And by no means do I have it figured out. I don't think anybody has it completely figured out. And there's a lot of different views, a lot of different debate, and I want to tell you, that's one thing that Travis Snow does really good in his book, laying out the different arguments. I mean, me going through it, I didn't realize that there were these different arguments. But what I want to begin with is just say, Daniel 9, the vision of the 70 weeks, is an incredible gift to us as believers. It was an incredible gift in Daniel's time. It was an incredible gift. It should have been an incredible gift leading up to the Messiah's first appearing. But it is an incredible gift in us understanding the end of the age. And so I'm not going to dive into the different views. I'm not going to dive into the weeds. I just want us to sit back and say, man, that's in there. That's the hope as we're walking through that. It's just to say, man, and so that's in this chapter. I didn't realize that what we have, it is an incredible gift. And one of the things that it gives us is, yes, it is Stand Firm 360, is it brings us to talk about the first advent. When you say first advent, that's the first appearing of Christ. It's when he came the first time. And you know that if we look at the world at that time, we look at people who knew the law, that were faithful to God, and they missed it. Very few were ready. Very few accepted when Jesus came. Why? Because it wasn't what they expected of the Messiah. They didn't expect somebody to be born in Nazareth, though they should. Or not born, live in Nazareth, come from Nazareth. They didn't expect him to be on the bottom end, social, and economically. They didn't expect him to be the son of a carpenter, earthly speaking. They didn't expect him to not overthrow the Roman government at this time. They didn't expect him to be a suffering servant, though Isaiah talked about it at least 4 different passages of the suffering servant. Jesus did not meet the expectations. But right here in Daniel 9, it really said what the Messiah was going to do. It really split it up and talked about it in 2 parts. Again, many different views when you dive into it, but I just want you to hear what possibly we have here in Daniel 9. So Daniel 9:26. And so within Daniel 9, and we're going to touch on how it begins as we end, because I think it's really remarkable as well. But in the vision of 70 weeks, it begins with talking about this time period. And we're going to come back to what that is. But I want us to see what it says about Jesus' first appearing. And so I'm going to begin in verse 24. It says, 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. What? It seems very cryptic in a sense. And there, of course, there are different views. But ultimately, I think we can just simplify this and say, hey, we've got 77s, which 77 refers to a group of 7 years. So 77-year time periods that we have until everything that was promised comes to be, comes to happen. Think of that. A time frame. That's what we want, right? You know, I'm all about the timeline. You've seen my simplified timeline. If you're there on Facebook or especially on YouTube, it's our first video that you come to. And we do a series. I do a series live, and I've done it online because you are here, where we talk about where are we in the prophetic timeline. Well, we got years here. We've got time period. I mean, just incredible. We'll come back to that. Verse 25 says, know and understand this, from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, what? the ruler comes, there will be 70 sevens, 62 sevens, and it will be 7 sevens, 62 sevens, and it will be rebuilt with the streets and a trench. But in time of trouble, after the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Okay, a lot being said there. We got this decree to rebuild Jerusalem. We've got the anointed one coming, but I want us to jump to verse 26. And it says, after 62 sevens, the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. So it gives us time period. We'll come back to what that means. But it says the anointed one. From other texts, we understand this is the Messiah. This is the promised one. The one we know of now as Jesus. That he will be cut off and have nothing. But first of all, it talks that the Messiah is going to be here after this period of, ultimately, as you walk through it, 69 weeks or 69 sevens. He will be here. Amazing. And it says he will be cut off. So strange. But think about it. If we're living before the time of Christ and we're trying to figure out the Messiah, if we could have gone here, you'd have the time period of his appearing. And then it's told he will be cut off. What does that mean? Well, we know on this side of it, it was a cross. It was a crucifixion. He was cut off from his work. He stopped. 3 years into his public work, he stopped. He never did all the Messiah stuff. And then a very strange statement after this, that he will have nothing, which many people run in different ways. I think one of the things that Travis does in his book, he touches on how commentators talk about, it seems to have this connotation of he will seemingly accomplish nothing. He will be cut off, and when we look back, you're like, dude didn't accomplish anything. He sure wasn't the Messiah with what he did. Think of that, what we have. In Daniel's lifetime, over 500 years before the time of Christ, before his appearing, we're told he's going to appear. In so many years, he's going to appear. He's going to be cut off. And he's going to seemingly accomplish nothing. Incredible that we have that. Now, we have so many other prophecies about the Messiah. I mean, the idea that he would be cut off, well, that is unique. But we go to like Isaiah 53 that walks through what Jesus will face, what the Messiah will face. We got the other suffering servant passages in Isaiah. But the beauty in Daniel 9, we have these things. Well, then it also jumps to the end of the age. And we have the end time timeline. So if you've seen Jake's simplified timeline, or if you've seen any other premillennial timeline, Daniel 9 was the greatest biblical passage tool to help create that timeline. And I want to walk through that and tell you why. Again, verse 26 and 27. So immediately we pick up after this talking about the Messiah being cut off. Verse 26 says, after the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be cut off, and he will have nothing. And the people of the ruler who will come to destroy the city and the sanctuary, the end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end. The desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of that 7, he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed and is poured out on him. I know it's cryptic, but when we compare it to other passages, man, this is just a real condensed timeline that's laying the things out. And it begins with, okay, it says after 67, the anointed one, the Messiah, cut off, he will have nothing. Then the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and sanctuary, and the end will come like a flood. The people of the ruler, which many point back to this being maybe possibly in 70 AD, the destruction of the temple. Wherever this is, it's talking about this ruler will come ultimately, and that's where I want to jump. And it says he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7, for a 7-year time period. And in the middle of that, he breaks that. And in a wing of the temple, or in the temple, he sets up the abomination of desolation. Timeline. Check this out. What we have in the timeline. Well, get my controls going here. The coming of the Antichrist. Right here. He will come. And there's debate, and Travis does a good job in this book. You have many others who talk about trying to figure out, because you have these two he's, you have these two, one it makes very clear is the anointed one, uses language to understand it's the Messiah. But then you have this language here talking about this other ruler who comes that we know of later as the Antichrist. We know in Daniel 8, the little horn, which seems to lead into this, but we have this Antichrist. He will come, and he confirms this covenant, makes this covenant for 1 week, for 7 years. We have the origin of the Antichrist. So if, and there is debate here, if this people of the ruler destroying the sanctuary refers to what happens in 70 AD, we know where he's going to come from. We know the group of people that he belongs to, which is absolutely incredible. So we may have the origin there. We have the nature of the end of the age. It will come like a flood. In Matthew 24, as Jesus is talking about the signs of the time, it comes through Matthew 24, says all these signs, and he says, like the days of Noah, the end will come like a flood. People will be marrying, giving in marriage, will be drinking and being merry, and the end will come like a flood. So we're given 500 years before Jesus says it. We're given the nature of the end times. And then as we read there, the war will continue to the end. Desolations that's been decreed will happen. Wars and rumors of wars, like Jesus said. And all these things given right here in Daniel 9. But this is what's really big about Daniel 9. It is where we get the whole 7-year time period. The whole 7-year tribulation thing, which if you've caught in, listened much, I don't think we should look at the whole 7 years as tribulation, but we do have a 7-year period beginning with, as we talked about the start of it, with the Antichrist making this covenant, strengthening this covenant, whatever that is, whatever that means with Israel, that Isaiah refers to as the covenant of death. A time clock starts, and there's 7 years until everything wraps up and it's done. This is where we get that. Now, this is confirmed elsewhere. Daniel 12, as we're given time period, is confirmed in the book of Revelation, as we read about what the work of the Antichrist, and we see about the two witnesses. I mean, this time frame comes back up, this 3.5 year time periods and the 7-year time period. But this is where we get the understanding of that, the starting. We get where we can put push the timer and know, okay, 7 years from now it's going to happen. It's where we get the idea that the covenant being confirmed and strengthened is what it says. Many people jump to, well, this is a peace treaty. There's a peace treaty, reconfirmed, and those things. Whatever it is, whatever the covenant Israel makes, this is the question. This is where it starts. This is where we get that. We also have possibly where we get the rebuilding of the temple. Like one of the questions is does there have to be a new temple? Is that going to be rebuilt? Well, one of the number one places to go and work through this is what we read is this abomination that leads to desolation is going to occur. Like, it's very strange language here, a wing of the temple as it's referred to in the NIV, but like a portion of the temple or something like that, which to me is like, okay, it may not be exactly like we picture, but if we're going to say, hey, the temple, it needs to be rebuilt, it's going to be rebuilt, this is where you go. This is where that idea comes from. This is where that is. Now, we see allusions to that elsewhere, but this is the main place where that comes from. And it's also where we get the time frame of the Great Tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. As it talks about, it says, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of that 7, so 3.5 years in, he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering. So it's also where we get the sacrifices and offerings are restarted. And on the wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. And we understand this later on. We understand this ushers in him pursuing the nation of Israel. This is the time of Jacob's trouble. This is the Great Tribulation. And the abomination of desolation, which is the thing, if you go through Matthew 24, and Jesus is talking about all these signs, he says, this is a thing to look for. And he's going back to Daniel. He says that Daniel said, the abomination of desolation that leads to desolation. And we understand this some way, and we see this in Revelation 13 a bit more, that an image of the Antichrist is set up, or something is set up that leads to worship, and just is an abomination that leads to his ultimate desolation, but it also triggers the start of the Great Tribulation. But it also leads to the defeat ultimately of the Antichrist until the end that is decreed is poured out on him as it closes. And so he's going to have an end. which we know that we definitely see this elsewhere, but it's all here. I mean, we get this whole 7-time-year period right here. Daniel 9, the vision of 70 weeks is incredible. But I think why it's so incredible is because the context in which it's framed and it was given. That leads me to this. Daniel 9 gives us a model example of how our response should be to prophecy. The 70 weeks gets all the credit, gets all the attention, as it should, as you said. It's incredible what we have. But look at what this says about the response. Begin in verse 1. In the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, who was made ruler of the Babylonian kingdom, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood from the scriptures, according to the word the Lord had given to Jeremiah the prophet, that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. So Daniel is one of the first to be deported, to be exiled to Babylon. So he's in Babylon, he's exiled. From there, he gets the news that Jerusalem falls, temple destroyed, more exiles come. He sees that. He becomes in leadership in Babylon, still keeping his faithfulness to the Lord. And somehow, he gets Jeremiah's fresh new book that was written as Jerusalem fell. He gets a copy of that. He reads that bestseller. You know, it's like getting a Jonathan Cahn book or something, right? You got the Harbingers by Jeremiah, and he dives into that. And he sees this prophecy that the Lord has given, that they're going to be in an exile, but it's only going to last 70 years. But listen to his response. So he's there. Babylon has been defeated. It's now, the Persians now have control. And he says, so I turned to the Lord and pleaded with him in prayer and petition and fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed to the Lord. I'm going to read his prayer, but this response is, read the prophecy. It's not just a prophecy, it's a promise of the Lord that he's going to bring the people back. So as Daniel's reading this, his heart, he sees, we're here because of sin. Jeremiah, these other guys, they tried to warn us. We're here because of our sin. But if we turn back to the Lord, he's going to bring us back. It's only going to last 70 years. And so he repents. He's praying for himself. He's praying for his people on behalf of his people. He's like standing in the middle. And he prays, "Oh Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with all who love him and obey his commands. We have sinned and done wrong. We have been wicked and we have rebelled. We have turned away from your commands and laws. We have not listened to your servants and to the prophets who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and all the people of the land. Lord, you are righteous, but this day we are covered with shame, the men of Judah and the people of Jerusalem, all of Israel, both near and far, in all the countries where you have scattered them, because of our unfaithfulness. O Lord, we and our kings, our princes, our fathers are covered with shame, because we have sinned against you. The Lord our God is merciful, forgiving, even though we have rebelled against him. We have not obeyed the Lord our God or kept his laws. He gave us through his servants and prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned away and refusing to obey you." And he continues this amazing prayer. But that was his response. His response was brokenness. His response was, oh my, we've got to get right. He's praying for, Daniel was there, man. He was doing what needed to be done, but he's praying for his people. It's his answer, but he's also then goes on for God to bring them back into the promise and into the land, to keep that promise. And so in that prayer, from that prayer, God sends the angel Gabriel, who gives him the vision of the 70th weeks. So we have this amazing, amazing understanding of how to respond. But I also think Daniel 9 possibly gives us the timing of the first advent. And so it talks about there being this decree to rebuild Jerusalem. There's debate on which one this is. Again, I think one of the things Travis does in his book is point to possibly the when it was fulfilled, not just the giving of that, but when it was fulfilled. But whatever it is, because there were many decrees. We've got the decree from Cyrus to rebuild Jerusalem. We've got Nehemiah's time to rebuild the wall. We've got all these different things in these time markers. But from some time marker of this decree, there's going to be 483 years. And the Messiah appears, and that's when he's cut off. Think about it. If you were tracking in the Word, you're reading Daniel. You're reading Daniel in year 201 BC. And you see, oh my goodness, 483 years. It's been about 250, possibly. Man, I better tell my kids in 200 years, man, the Messiah is going to be here, right? If you're reading it in 81, oh my, it's been nearly 480 some years. Messiah could be here. I think that's why you had the wise men looking at that time period. So we have this here, this example of the first advent. But then we jump to the signs that we have. I think Daniel 8, possibly, if that's futuristic, looking at that and knowing that's a start of different things. We have the rise of the Antichrist, where he talks about the little horn and all those things. We've got all of that. And so if we can lean into the word today, how we might be ready to see the things when they occur. So much debate, again, on how it breaks down. But if that's what we have here in Daniel 9, what a lesson we could learn. Which then, as I was saying, it's a lesson on paying attention to prophecy, paying attention and looking at it and what it can do. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing Stand Firm. Because part of being ready, being prepared for the last days is knowing what's going to happen. So I wanted us to look through what we have in Daniel 9, because I think it's an incredible gift. We need to dive into it. There's so many things we can have there that we can learn. But what I really want to point us to is just how that, if we could lean into it like they should have at the time of the first advent, what a difference that would have made. If we could propel ourselves to look at prophecy in that same way today, man, we could be ahead. Daniel 9 is an incredible gift. So if you're watching this live, I hope that you jump into our Facebook group. You'll find a link there in the notes. I hope you get our book of the month. You read through it and dive into it more. But I hope we challenge you and push you to understand more about Daniel 9, because it is an incredible gift.